And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to episode 211 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. Once again, we're going to skip all the promotional stuff and get right to the meat of the episode. Today's discussion will center on a particular actor who doesn't really act anymore at a particular time. One magical summer in which this actor starred in 3 huge hit films. 2 of them were part of a series. And, well, one of them became a series, one was part of the series, and the third one was later spun off into a very successful TV series. The actor is Rick Moranis. The 3 movies that he starred in all came out in the summer of 1989 over a 6-week stretch. Ghostbusters 2, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and Parenthood. So Rick Moranis is 71, and he kind of became a breakout star. He's Canadian, I should point that out. He's part of the incredibly talented comics from Canada that include Eugene Levy, John Candy, Catherine O'Hara, just so many stupendously talented. Well, Victor Garber is Canadian, but he's not really a comedian. That's Victor Garber. If you don't know the name, he was in Elektra with Jennifer Garner, and most famously on Titanic, he plays Andrews, the shipbuilder. But Rick Moranis was on SCTV, which is kind of, I guess you could describe it as the Canadian Saturday Night Live, except I think it actually started before Saturday Night Live. So, it was right around the same time. It may have been the same season or maybe the season after. I got my dates mixed up, sorry. Saturday Night Live first season was 75, and I think that SCTV may have started in 76, or maybe it's just that Moranis joined it in 76. On that, I'm not sure, but it isn't critically important. He was on SCTV for 8 years, and just was incredible, playing different characters. What was it, Dave and Bob McKenzie, a couple of guys, couple of Canadians like to have some suds, eh? Like that kind of thing. But Moranis, although he acted in movies, he was in a couple of films in the early 80s. It wasn't until the original Ghostbusters that he made a very serious impression, playing the next door neighbor of Sigourney Weaver's Dana Barrett. He's, of course, desperately in love with her, because how could he not be? It's Sigourney Weaver. He takes what could easily have been a throwaway role, a nothing supporting part, and he turns it into something memorable, just by sheer force of will, and the fact that he's just this little kind of nebbishy guy, but he just has he just has a way about him. In his own fashion, Rick Moranis is an actor who has a very particular kind of magic. And in the right role, the guy's a fucking home run hitter. So he's a big reason, I think, as to why Ghostbusters are so successful, because so many of the scenes with Louis Tully are either hilarious, or you're kind of on the edge of your seat because you don't know what this guy is going to do, or just he has the kinds of scenes that you want to watch again and again, when he's trying to dance, he's throwing a party, and he's giving out what amounts to private information about all of his accounting clients. Ted's still receiving a deferred bonus from 2 years ago. He's got a small carpet cleaning business in receivership, as if this is something you should just be saying out loud at a party about clients and friends. Yeah, no problem. By the time of 1986, Moranis was a star. He was a Hollywood star. And he made a movie that I absolutely adore, even though the official version is not really what director Frank Oz intended, and it strays from the original concept of the Broadway stage play Little Shop of Horrors. And Rick Moranis is not, yes, he can sing, but he was not a singer first. And in the movie version of Little Shop of Horrors, his co-star Ellen Greene was a terrific actress and a great singer. I really love his performance in Little Shop of Horrors. His character of Seymour Krelborn, he seems like a sad sack, but he's really not. He's just somebody who has dreams, and his life hasn't turned out the way that it could have. But also, from a certain point of view, he's kind of gotten lucky because, yeah, he's got to get out of Skid Row, but he does have people around him who care. And meeting Audrey, or, you know, getting closer with Audrey, he thinks she's out of his league and she thinks he's out of his league. And there's a certain charm in that because it goes against the grain and it's unexpected. And when I first saw Little Shop of Horrors, I hadn't seen, I knew people who had seen the musical, but I didn't know the story. So I was, even as a kid, I was pleasantly surprised by that angle. I thought that was really well done. And of course, the supporting cast, John Candy, his old buddy, in a small role, Bill Murray, fucking home run hitter, also in a cameo, and Steve Martin, spectacular as the world's most sadistic dentist, Orin Scrivello, DDS. It ended up being a significant box office hit and got a lot of acclaim. There were some awards nominations for makeup, and Levi Stubbs of the Four Tops did the voice of Audrey too. That's the kind of man-eating plant from outer space. Even though the original version of the film, which I've seen, it's available on YouTube. It's pretty fucking dark. Basically, Audrey takes over the world and we're all gonna die. It's almost like we talk about movies like Deep Impact or Armageddon. It's an extinction level event. That's what the original ending was, an extinction level event. So the movie is still terrific. The songs are great, and the kind of love story between Seymour and Audrey is very sweet, and somehow it doesn't feel maudlin. It feels just right, to me anyway. And I watched the film not that long ago, within the last year, and it still held up. I love Vincent Gardenia's performance also as the shop owner Mushnick. Just great all around. So if you fast forward to the summer of 1989, the first of the three films to come out was Ghostbusters 2, the sequel to, as I recently talked about on the channel, the massive box office hit, the original Ghostbusters. Just a huge hit, well over 300 million worldwide. Well, 5 years later, the sequel did, I mean, by any metric, it should be considered a huge hit. It made 220 million. That's fucking serious. Oh, it was 212. I'm sorry, 212. But it was considered a bit of a disappointment because a lot of people didn't like it, and the word of mouth was not really that great. And I saw it the weekend it opened with my dad and my sister. My sister was very young at the time. She was, what was she, 5? And my dad, who of course I saw as very old, he was 46, 4 years younger than I am now. He was really old, yeah. And I was 15. I enjoyed it, but I thought it was a letdown. I had seen the original, I don't know, at least a dozen times already, and we used to watch. My sister was obsessed with it. She always had it on in the VCR player. Always were playing it. It was a letdown, not great, but it was 200 plus million, and Moranis' character, at least in theory, becomes more important in the second film because he kind of becomes an honorary Ghostbuster. And he has a moment, and it's a great moment, where he thinks that he has actually played a role in saving the day. But he kind of builds on the awkwardness and the extreme autism spectrum, neurodivergency, Klinefelter syndrome, whatever it is that is going on with this guy. He builds on it, and he has really wonderful moments with Annie Potts, who herself is a fucking home run hitter. She's fantastic. As the assistant to the Ghostbusters. I forgot the name of the character, but the scenes that they have together are great. Like, he's trying to ask her out. He's desperate to ask her out on a date, and he's just stumbling and bumbling, and it's beautiful screwball comedy acting. It's right out of the Cary Grant Bringing Up Baby playbook, where he stumbles and bumbles and he finally blurts out the phrase, "Do you want to have something to eat with me? Do you want to have something to eat with me?" Still makes me laugh. So, but it's a very specific performance. He's not just playing a nerd. He's playing a type of. He's got the glasses, and yeah, he's an accountant, and he's just so awkward and weird and goofy. So 1 week later, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids opens on June 23rd. And that ended up being a bigger hit than Ghostbusters 2. And Rick Moranis is in the lead. He is the lead character, even though I think the kids have more screen time than his character of Wayne Szalinski. But he's the lead. And the ads in the film show him with a microscope. The ads got people into the theaters. And honestly, the special effects, 35 years later, they still hold up because there is some computer work, but there's more great practical effects, makeup work, a little bit of animatronics in there if memory serves. And just the way that they were able to size things appropriately to make it believable. Like how big would an ant be if a kid shrinks to a certain size? They really did a good job with that. And at its heart, it's an adventure story. He shrinks the kids, and how can they first get back home? How can they avoid being eaten or killed by insects or, eaten by a dog or a cat or whatever it might be? And the film builds a good amount of suspense as Wayne Szalinski attempts to, because he's brilliant, attempts to figure out we got to find the kids, and how am I going to get them back? Because so far, all I know how to do is miniaturize. So in that movie, Rick also plays, he's a nerdy guy, but he's more of a pure intellectual. Like Wayne Szalinski is a creator. He's an inventor. He's a brilliant guy. Louis Tully is just an accountant on the autism spectrum. So they're both nerdy, but what we get out of Wayne Szalinski is he's not necessarily awkward. He's not really a schlemiel. He is a guy who has been pretty successful and has created something that, well, they still haven't figured this out. They still haven't created it. It's postmodern. The science is postmodern, even though the story is not really science. I mean, you could call it science fiction. It's a fantasy. It's a fairy tale, basically. But Moranis' performance he's just great. Because, yes, this is a serious situation, but he and the movie never lose sight. The primary goal is to entertain, not to get into an existential crisis about what would it be like if we had to spend the rest of our lives. Number one, from the kids' perspective, we have to spend the rest of our lives, 6 inches tall or 2 inches taller. I don't remember exactly what it is. And Wayne Szalinski spends the rest of his life saying, my God, I shrunk my kids and I never saw them again because maybe they got eaten up by rats. Who the fuck knows, right? Maybe they got stung by a scorpion in the backyard and they died and decomposed. Whatever it is. He sells it, and that triggered a successful franchise. Although I think 2 of the films went straight to video, they sold well and they turned a profit. Didn't have as big a budget as the first one. So imagine he had 2 movies in the top 2 or 3 at the box office 1 week to the next. That doesn't happen in Hollywood. Like, that's very rare. What it means is there were staggered release schedules. I'm sorry, not staggered. There were staggered shooting schedules. Because if you're working on the same, you don't work on movies you're not going to work on in the same day, is what I'm trying to say. There are times where you shoot a film and there's like 8 months before it's released. And then other times where maybe it's only 4. It was probably something as simple as that. I don't know which movie was shot first. My guess is that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was shot first because he had longer hair for that. And it would have been easier for him to get a haircut to play Louis Tully in Ghostbusters 2 than vice versa. It had to be within a couple of months, though. And, he was a big reason why the film was a hit. The trailers were interesting. The kids were likable. And, that poster with him and a magnifying glass, it sold it. And it was a good movie. Generally speaking, it got better reviews than Ghostbusters 2, which, Rotten Tomatoes is probably in the 50 range. The actors are great. Everyone's terrific in that film. The story just isn't that interesting. That's the problem. That was always the problem with Ghostbusters 2. They just, sometimes you don't pick the right script. To me, it was as simple as that. The script is just not that interesting. So my little, quick summary of Ghostbusters 2, not very good. 2.5 stars maximum. I'll give it 2.5 out of 4 just because Bill Murray is still hitting home runs, and Aykroyd is hilarious, and Harold Ramis, and Rick Moranis. Now, fast forward to later in the summer, the first week in August. I want to say it was August 2nd, was the Friday. Parenthood. Now we know the name because shows like, I don't remember the show. There was a show, a very similar concept of kind of an extended family, because there was the show Parenthood on TV. And, but this was a different show. Can't remember the name of it. But Parenthood as a movie was a one-off. It's the kind of thing, I guess they could have done a sequel, but when you have such a huge cast of, in some cases, big stars, in other cases, just terrific performers, it's difficult to get everybody back. And I don't know if they were talking about making a sequel. But in Parenthood, Rick plays another intellectual. His name is Nathan in this film. And he is married to who I believe is Steve Martin's sister in the film. It's this big extended family, and everybody has their own situation going on. Each person in the family has some kind of a focal point or a crisis point or a turning point in their lives that takes place during the story of this film and during the world, in the world of the film. So it's very much an ensemble story, but it's told in sequence. And Rick Moranis' thing, so he's married to, as I say, Steve Martin's sister, played by an actress who was in a lot of movies in that era, and then, I don't know, she seemed to kind of disappear, Harley Jane Kozak. And I think they have 2 kids, if I'm not mistaken. But his character is a little bit of an antagonistic force. He's not a villain, but he comes across as somebody who is kind of focused on the wrong things. And his theories of parenting are, he's kind of the G-rated version of the movie Whiplash, the sort of brutal band instructor who will not accept anything less than 100% all the time and perfection. So his character has these advanced learning techniques with his kids that he's implementing to try to turn them into geniuses. He keeps saying they're like sponges, that they can absorb so much knowledge when they're very young. And his wife, Harley Jane's character, is frustrated because all he does now is drill the kids. They don't really have much social life. They don't play with friends because they don't have any friends. All they're doing is schoolwork and supplemental scholastic academic activities. She's just fed up. And he needs not even an attitude adjustment. He just needs to look at things a little differently. They're kids. They don't need to be super geniuses. What are we doing here? So Rick, for the 3rd time in a summer, is playing somebody who has a high IQ, and he is entirely different. The character in this movie is far more self-assured and far more confident than the other 2 characters that he played in the same summer. He comes across as a guy resolute. He's utterly convinced he's right. And it isn't until his wife pretty much threatens to, listen, you don't stop acting like a dick. She doesn't say dick, but I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to leave you. This is unacceptable. They are children, and we need to start treating them like children. It doesn't mean that school isn't important or academics we don't want them to achieve, but this is not tenable, and I can't be part of it anymore. So Rick Moranis, I love this part of it. At the end of a summer where he had to know that they were all going to release in the summer and that they were probably all going to be hits because he was very confident in the Parenthood script. Yeah, it's Steve Martin's movie. Martin is the closest thing we have to a central character as Gil. And Martin is terrific, as is Jason Robards Jr. in one of his last real meaty roles in a great film. And former Academy Award nominee Tom Hulce as the kind of wayward son. He's great. The whole cast, Mary Steenburgen, Keanu Reeves, Diane Wiest, a very young Joaquin Phoenix, Martha Plimpton, everybody brings their A game. Towards the end of the movie, Rick Moranis' character gets this terrible shock of just how unhappy his wife is. And he shows up, she's a school teacher, he shows up in her class and he starts to sing Close to You by the Carpenters. And it is such a great moment. It's a great movie moment. And it's a Rick Moranis moment where here's a guy who starred in 3 movies with a combined gross of like 570 million combined gross over the summer, or somewhere in that ballpark. 212, 223, 126. Call it 560. So 3 huge box office hits in one summer, and he caps it off, metaphorically, by winning back his wife by singing, "Why do birds suddenly appear? Shut up! Every time I'm not listening, you are near, just like me." She goes for it. And as much as it's possible for an ensemble story with so many different narratives taking place at the same time, for a story like that, or a film like that, with like 8 different plot lines and plot threads going at once, it ends about as up as it possibly can, and it feels real. It feels believable. It does not ever pander to the audience. And for my money, Rick gives the best performance. I mean, if you want to go Jason Robards Jr., because his character is actually very interesting. And man, Robards was a home run hitter. What a great actor he was. He's the patriarch of this family that Rick married into. And Rick gets along with everybody. Gil gets a kick out of him. Steve Martin's character, he kind of thinks it's humorous with the drills that he's doing with his kids and stuff like that. But Robards, as the patriarch, he seems to be a guy's hard worker, and he has we're led to believe he's a successful entrepreneur. The Tom Hulse character comes back, and we get the idea that Tom's character was the favored child, and he's intelligent, but he's a bit of a wastrel. He's gotten in huge gambling trouble, and he just can't stay focused on any one thing at a time. And the way that Robards handles the scenes with Tom Hulse, where he wants to believe that this kid can make something of himself, but he just keeps screwing around and not taking anything seriously enough. And Robards is just fantastic. And it's sad. That's the one sad piece of the story, which is his dealings with the youngest son. This essentially, Hulse is playing Steve Martin's younger brother. Sometimes you got to say goodbye, but he doesn't exactly say goodbye. He knows that his son is not coming back. And Tom Hulse's character has pretty much left his grandson, meaning Robards' grandson, with him, and he's okay with it. He seemed resistant to it at first, to the idea of, this is my grandson. And a grandson who is very quiet, doesn't have much in the way of dialogue in the film. His name is Cool. That's a moment of humor between Moranis and Steve Martin when Tom Hulse introduces, this is my son, Cool. And Rick Moranis actually kind of leans over to Steve Martin and goes, did he say cool? And Steve Martin goes, cool, just like that. So everybody in the movie has a moment, an up moment, a down moment, just an actorly moment. And Steve Martin has many memorable scenes, a scene where he dresses up as a cowboy for his son's birthday. It's a wonderful film, and easily, for me, it's my favorite movie. It's my favorite movie of the 3 that Rick Moranis starred in or co-starred in. Because in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, his name's above the titles. He's the star. In Ghostbusters 2, it is a supporting performance. And in Parenthood, it's a supporting performance. But each time, he brings different tools to the set, to the construction of his character and the film he's working on. He brings what he needs. The neurodivergent autism spectrum magnificently awkward Louis Tully in Ghostbusters 2, the slightly space cadet-y, but very, very focused and intelligent Wayne Szalinski in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and the brilliant, but he needs an attitude and life adjustment, Nathan Huffner in Ron Howard. Wonderful, memorable, fantastic, underappreciated, in my opinion, Parenthood. 1989, the summer of Star Trek V, the summer of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the summer of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, the summer of Karate Kid 3. It was also the summer of Rick Moranis. Retired, gone from the movie business, but not forgotten. And I, for one, I'm still waiting for him to make a comeback. This has been episode 211 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this afternoon, this Monday afternoon drive with me here in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 212 real soon. Till then,